Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode 8 of In the Box. And for about the fifth straight time, we're going to be talking about the New York Rangers a decent amount. We're going to be talking about the Rangers, the Fowler trade, the Buffalo Sabres absolutely stinking right now. What else do we got? What else is on this? Oliver Wahlstrom getting waiver claimed, the Ottawa Senators being fully back. And then at the end, we're going to be going through your takes and we're going to say whether or not we agree or disagree. I didn't introduce you. Matt, how are you doing, Babiak?
Yeah, I'm thrilled. Very daring today talking about the Rangers. What a curveball.
Yes, we'll just dive into it because basically they've been the talk of the town. I get called like obsessed with them, but like objectively the last 3 to 4 weeks, they have been by far the biggest story in hockey, considering they were expected to be cup contenders. Then it comes out that they're going to trade people. They trade Jacob Trouba. And now, unfortunately, Kakko has been traded. The Finnish Prince of New York has been traded to the Seattle Kraken for a third, a sixth, and William Borgen. I guess I'll start on this because I didn't make like an official YouTube video or anything on it yet. It felt inevitable just because he got scratched Sunday and it was just got ugly considering a Tuesday at practice. He was basically saying like, I didn't feel like I got deserved. I don't feel like I was deserved to get scratched. There has been players that have been far worse than me this season. And although I think he might not be wrong with that, he just never really developed in New York. And now that he is just so clearly unhappy and the team is struggling, it seemed inevitable after those comments. And especially he got like 10 minutes of ice time against the Nashville Predators when they also lost to Nashville. Talk about all-time low. That he was going to get traded. It's definitely an underwhelming return when you just look at a former second overall pick. But I think the isolated, like people are saying, like it's an F trade. I agree. The Kakko experience has kind of been an F or a D minus. It's an okay return. He's a 23-year-old middle sixer that's pretty decent, that can play on a playoff team, has playoff experience. You got mid-round picks for him and a depth defenseman, or on the Rangers might honestly be like their number 5 or number 6 defenseman. It's unfortunate, but it's something that had to happen, and there probably needs to be more changes for the New York Rangers. That was a long spiel by me. What do you think?
I think, and Rangers fans aren't going to want to hear this, Kaapo Kakko is a good hockey player. He's not amazing. He's not worth his draft slot, but he's fundamentally good at hockey. He's bad at scoring, and scoring is the most important part of hockey. Okay, granted. The other parts of hockey, as an all-around player, he's pretty good. This year, he's a +9 on a team that's minus at even strength. His XG rate is above 50%. You can't say that about Trocheck. You can't say that about Zibanejad. They've been worse this year than Kakko. And it was never going to work. I agree. Just the way that the New York market put so much pressure on him being such a high draft pick, he's not going to live up to those expectations. It won't happen. I think Seattle is going to just treat him as the kind of guy he is, right? We have a pretty good defense first third liner. That's all we expect him to be. That's all the trade price was. That's all we're paying him for. And he is going to do that. I mean, Seattle's not an amazing team, but they are a deep team. You know, they're a team that runs 4 lines. They're a team that's
a bunch of good like second liners.
Yeah, it's kind of like the expansion Vegas type system where you get in a large number of guys who are all decent contributors, a well-rounded team. Kakko is a really good fit in there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. If you're Seattle, they're just so below average right now in most regards. So you might as well, outside of like their top 2 defensemen, so you might as well do something like this. I am a little bit concerned considering they do have so many good young forward prospects, like a guy like Jagger Firkus and Berkeley Cadden. Like they're going to need ice time soon, and you're bringing in a 23-year-old. But I still think it's good. They have some older forwards like Schwartz, Tanev, Eberle, and Yanni Gord that are getting up there in age. I think Kakko, like, I don't think that he's going to change it or anything. I don't think Seattle's going to be a playoff team this year and next. I would have loved to see a more so playoff team utilize Kakko in like a third line role. I think that would have been really interesting for some kind of revitalization. How would you break it down in terms of like the Kakko experience? How much would you put it on the player? How much would you put it on like coaching in general, man, like developing?
So, of course, we're not really going to know until we see how he does in Seattle, if there's improvement or if he's the same. I put it entirely on the coaching because, you know, the Rangers as a team have not developed forwards. I mean, they've picked what feels like 7 or 8 forwards in the lottery section of a draft in the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. Not sure of the numbers. The point is, it's been quite a few guys. And really, the only one who's hit outside of, number one overall pick last, the only one who's been a hit at all is Filipino.
Mhm.
The rest is like Elias Anderson out of the league in a couple years. That's really the bar there. So they're bad at developing the market, the media. It's just so tough on guys like Kakko who come in with the hype and they don't score right away. The main comparison I think of for Kakko, another second overall pick, Jordan Stahl, who Pittsburgh took him.
That's
He was
high. That's
decent
high
in
praise.
Pittsburgh, but a major
He was
disappointment for
pretty
his draft
good.
slot. He goes to
Won a
Carolina.
cup.
He's like one of the best shutdown centers in the league because Carolina doesn't need him or ask him to play much offense. I don't think Kakko is as good as
Yeah.
Jordan Stahl, but I do think that's like the overall trajectory he's on. And I won't be surprised at all if Kakko is like a really good, nice to have third liner for another decade in the league.
Yeah, I could definitely see something where him and Matty Beniers are underwhelming given their draft position at second overall, but for the next decade, they're 55-ish point second liners on Seattle, and guys like Furcus and Cadden actually like pop, and maybe in 3 to 4 years, Seattle can be a high level team. But yeah, right now for the New York Rangers, it just seems like absolute disarray. And when you look at their upcoming schedule, going back to New York, they have Dallas, Carolina, New Jersey, Tampa, Florida, Boston, Washington. Then they got Chicago, Dallas, New Jersey, Vegas, and Colorado, their next 12 games. So basically, 11 out of the next 12 are against probably top 12 teams in the entire NHL. You previously had said you're not that worried about New York, that they're going to figure it out.
I'm
You
worried
can't.
now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say the schedule definitely softens after that. Like they can maybe if they somehow go 500 during the stretch, although they might not be in a playoff spot after going 500, you take that 100%. I expect their season might be over come mid-January if they go to
3-8-1 with this schedule. It seems possible.
Like even if they do have an easier schedule, like they might be selling further. I don't even know what moves Chris Drewer really has left in his bag outside of a Chris Kreider potential move. Because as we talked about before, they got rid of the two guys that were fully expendable in Jacob Trouba and Kaapo Kakko. At this point, I don't really know what the hell you do unless you do some absurd like Kreider and you attach Gabriel Perreault in a first round pick to go out and get like a legit top four defenseman. But at this point, as a 500 team, I'm not sure that you're going to risk the future, trade that much future assets to potentially. I think you might have to punt on the season. Not punt on the season, but like not just stay put. Just stay put at this point. It's unfixable right now.
I agree with that. And I guess I want to say that I don't think this is the players themselves for underperforming because it seems to me from the outside that just like the overall atmosphere there is so toxic, right? There is so much negativity and controversy around that locker room 24/7. Even when they were winning enough games to be in a playoff spot 3 weeks ago, so much negativity all the time in that locker room. I don't know what the fix is. Maybe, I mean, you already got rid of the captain and it hasn't made that any better. So I don't really have the answers there. It's just, I don't think there's any path up. And it's not because like there's no path up because Zibanejad won't improve. I think he will improve, but I don't think this like overall vibe is going to improve. I think it's just going to be nasty and toxic and a lot of guys feeling uninspired and checking out.
Yeah, I think next year if they do some tweaks, they could yet again be a high level team. I just think, as you mentioned, it's so toxic right now within that locker room, and they are playing so bad. And you have players openly, obviously, he got traded, but Kaapo Kakko actively taking shots a little bit at other players. It just seems like they might need a clear house this summer and completely reevaluate. Because at the end of the day, you still have a top five defenseman in the entire NHL. You still have a top three goaltender. You have the core pieces to be a high level team. Panarin's still playing like a top 15 player in the entire NHL. It's just you had some brutal pieces in terms of Trouba, in terms of Zibanejad, that you're going to have to find some kind of answers for, some type of rehabilitation process to figure it out. But at this point, yeah, I'm definitely taking a team that we're going to speak about shortly for that potential wild card spot. I think the New York Islanders fully healthy, if they can somewhat figure out their special teams, I'd probably pick them to finish ahead of the New York Rangers. I'd say they have like a 36% chance at making the playoffs. What would your number be about right now?
I mean, that sounds about right. I would say 40, but 35 sounds about right.
Yeah, they're going to be in the mix. We're going to move on. We've talked about the New York Rangers enough at this point. We're going to stay in the state of New York. We're going to talk about the Buffalo Sabres, which the New York Rangers' only win in the last 6 games was against the Buffalo Sabres. They have lost 11 straight games. Now, granted, they've lost to pretty good teams: Minnesota, Vancouver, New York Islanders, Colorado, Winnipeg, Utah, Detroit, New York Rangers, Washington Capitals, Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Montreal Canadiens. So a couple teams that they definitely should have beaten, like Detroit, Montreal, and Utah probably. But at the end of the day, you just can't lose 11 straight. You need to stop the bleeding somewhere. You need to get some points where you can. They went from 11-9-1 to 11-17-4. The Athletic currently has them at a 7% chance to get the first overall pick compared to just 3% to make the playoffs. I'll throw it to you first. We can agree that this season is a wash at this point, similarly potentially to the New York Rangers. But where the hell do they go from here? Is there anywhere to go besides just completely tear it down or tear a lot of it down?
I mean, 11 losses straight is brutal. To like re-tear it down feels kind of silly to me because it feels like we're still mid teardown, right? They haven't actually hit the upswing yet.
2023 was like the mirage kind of
Yeah,
of that.
the problem with their overall core and timeline is that, they have good players, but they're not really like the super young ones. I mean, if you just look at the minutes that Tage and Tuck are playing together, Buffalo is actually like a pretty okay team. I mean, I know using plus minus in 2024 is old fashioned, but if your team is a minus 15, Tuck's a +9 right now. Tage is a +4.
That is
like
crazy.
they're not just getting empty points. They're playing well. Buffalo is playing well when those guys are on the ice. It's literally everyone else that's the problem. Dylan Cousins, who we talked about a few weeks ago, he's been in decline for 3 straight years. It's not getting better. The last month's been even worse. Jack Quinn, I was really looking forward to him coming into this year. He was Buffalo's leading scorer per minute last year. I figure he gets healthy, he gets consistent minutes, he's going to break out. What happens? They give him his top 6 role. He's firmly safe. Worst season of his career so far. Zach Benson showed absolutely zero growth from year 1 to year 2.
Man, I love Zach Benson.
So, like, you ask, what can you do? And, I don't really know. Like, these are their lottery picks from the last few years. What can you do if Zach Benson and Jack Quinn are not going to be top 6 caliber players? I don't really have an answer except, I guess, keep losing and keep drafting forwards in the top 5 and hope that eventually a couple of them break out. I think Noah Ostlund is a great prospect. That one guy is not going to, like, change this franchise, though.
Yeah, I love Consolinius. I think he's going to be a stud. But yeah, what it really comes down to is they didn't want to spend the money this offseason to actually improve that forward core. Not saying you could see this massive decline from Dylan Cousins coming, but the fact that they brought out Jeff Skinner, brought in Jason Zucker for just $5 million and left like $7 to $8 million on the table in terms of cap space. They saved $7.5 million this summer from Jeff Skinner and just didn't spend all of it. It's ridiculous. If you're going to buy him out, you got to be aggressive like that, considering the fact they're going to have $4.4 million next season on the cap with that buyout, 6.4 after that. So although I was decently bullish on Jack Quinn, Zach Benson, like you mentioned, to rely on them to be your 5th or 6th best players at 19 and 20 or 21 years old on a playoff team was just absolutely ridiculous. And when you look at their other moves, they got Ryan McLeod. That was like perfectly bleh. Gave up Matthew Savoy. They gave up a 2nd-round pick to get Beck Malenstein. They went out and got, I believe, Sam Lafferty. The fact that they didn't make any impact serious moves, the fact they weren't in on any of these unrestricted free agents. I know that those can often end up in disasters, but they didn't do enough to actually improve their forward core like we thought that they needed to, considering their offense had staggered so much. I think they definitely need some more playmaking, especially on that top power play that's 3rd worst in the entire NHL at this point. Yeah, the internal growth hopefully will come in the next couple seasons, but you need to supplement that with some veteran experience. You don't give out 5, 6, 7 year deals that are going to ruin you down the end of the line. But I think something like a team we're going to talk about very soon, like the Ottawa Senators, bringing in a guy like Claude Giroux on a 3-year deal at 6.5. 6.5 was a little bit rich at the time, we thought, for a guy like Claude Giroux, but you paid him maybe a little bit higher in AAV, so you only got him for 3 years, and he was massive for helping develop guys like Tim Stützle's breakout, Brady Tkachuk taking another step. the fact that the Buffalo Sabres and Kevin Adams, and I can't fully blame Kevin Adams, but I think it is partially the ownership. The fact Kevin Adams thought, yeah, swapping Jeff Skinner for Jason Zucker and adding a bunch of bottom sixers that don't produce at all, it was never going to work.
What really stands out to me is that third worst power play. You look at this roster and you're thinking maybe they won't be great, maybe they won't win a ton, but at least they should be fun, right? At least they should have good
Like
top end
2023.
forwards. And none of those top end young forwards, the vets who have been there for a minute are decent enough. None of those young forwards are actually playing at like a top 6 level. I don't think Buffalo needed to be a playoff team this year. I do think they needed to get some real growth out of Benson, out of Quinn, and they haven't seen that at all, and that's the real disappointment. I also want to say real quick, Lindy Ruff is probably just not a very good hockey coach.
Yeah, I don't like that hire.
I mean, I hated that hire when it happened. I thought he was a bad coach with the Devils, who got lucky that the roster built for him was so amazing. It was basically impossible to mess up, and he still managed to miss the playoffs, essentially, with that core. I think he's just 100% the wrong guy to be steering a rebuild, trying to develop young forwards.
Yeah, I think they thought, oh, if he took a massive step with New Jersey in 2023, maybe he could do that with this team. But I think at this point, if you're Buffalo, I think you might have to move someone out like Bowen Byram. Hopefully, if a team still values Bowen Byram, because it came out that according to Elliot Friedman that he still wants to be a number 1 on a team or something like that. Good luck with that. I think you might have to move someone like Bowen Byram and attach maybe a young forward to get a legit impact forward, a veteran impact forward, because you're probably not getting it through free agency at this point. Do something aggressive like that from a rebuilding team. No player really comes to mind right now, but I think the forward core is just so lackluster right now. Something has to happen this offseason. I think this year you kind of commit to one more year of tanking, because if they do get Higgins, Misa, or Martone, I think we are talking about a little bit different. If you have a Tage Thompson, James Higgins forward center duo, then you might have to move out Dylan Cousins and attach something like that. Would you trade Dylan Cousins right now at like an all-time low?
I would want to trade Dylan Cousins if other teams are saying like you must attach first round picks to get rid of Dylan Cousins. I wouldn't.
Apparently Nashville might be in on him.
If they can trade, if I could trade Dylan Cousins right now for the Jacob Trouba return, I would take that
for a 4th round pick and just some bum.
Yes. Just to get the cap off the books and a culture reset, I would do that.
I get what you mean. I think if he continues to play like this and in the offseason you were offered that, I think I would do this. But again, he's still only 23 years old. 7.1 is a lot, but the cap is rising. I'm not sure I would fully give up on him. Maybe I would swap him with another forward that's kind of struggling right now, that's making around the same money, and just say change of scenery, whatever. But to just completely give up on him, I think the comparisons to like Sam Reinhart and other Buffalo forwards are very stupid. Sam Reinhart was a consistent 65-ish point guy before he got traded to Florida, and he got traded for a 1st round pick in Devin Levi. You wouldn't get that return for that return was actually pretty decent. They ended up getting them Yuri Kulich. So I would not punt on Dylan Cousins personally. If the return was juicy, I probably would. But I think at this point you just kind of ride it out and hope that you can rehabilitate him the rest of the way.
We went this whole segment without mentioning Levy until right now, Devin Levi. Just real quick here, because I don't want to put too much blame on him. Clearly, the system in front of him is trash.
Well, no, it's UPL that's been playing a lot.
Young goalie has been able to succeed. And UPL has taken the bulk of the starts, but I keep waiting for Levi to take the next step and take over the reins. It hasn't happened. When he does get minutes, he's usually not great.
Yeah, that was the thing in 2023, because he came in towards the end of that season and played very good, almost got them into the playoffs. So you kind of banked on him being your stud goalie of the future, and you're also still at UPL. But since then, he's really not been that good. UPL, it's looking like that January to March stretch that he had in the middle of last year was kind of fugazi. He has an 896 right now, and again, it's not all on him for sure. I think there's other reasons why this team is losing, but if you're a Buffalo Sabres fan, it's pretty bleak. You still have your 2 core pieces locked up at only 18. Well, Dolly's not that good of a deal, but at $18 million, a legit number 1 center and a legit top 10 defenseman. So you have that in place, similar to the Rangers. Like, your 2 core pieces are still great. Just everything outside of that this season has kind of gone south.
I do think UPL is fine. Not amazing or anything.
You're only
but
paying
like,
$4.75 million. Yeah, it's
if
not
Buffalo was the team that traded for Logan Thompson this summer, I'm not sure Logan Thompson would be doing much better than an 896 in that system behind that defense.
Yeah, that's fair. But we're going to move on to another trade that happened. This was like almost a week ago at this point. We haven't dropped the pod in like 10 days. Cam Fowler traded from Anaheim to St. Louis. They retained around $2.5 million. And as a result, the Anaheim Ducks moved up from a 4th-round pick to a 2nd-round pick. There was also some like ECHL, AHLer in it. I get what St. Louis is trying to do, considering the fact that Nick Leddy, I believe, is hurt. Torrey Krug's on the mend. They're trying to bring in a veteran guy that only has a year and a half left. I just think Cam Fowler is like completely washed up when looking at his minutes this season. A 42% expected goals percentage, which was the worst on the Anaheim Ducks. It's not like the Anaheim Ducks were dragging him down. He was one of the worst players in the Anaheim Ducks. In terms of his 2 most common pairs, Tristan Luneau, they gave up 4.76 expected goals per 60, which was worst in the entire NHL among 208 pairs that played at least 70 minutes. And him and Owen Zellweger was still 3.9 expected goals against per 60. Which was 5th worst in the NHL, and he's not even good offensively anymore. He has 4 points in 20 games this season. If they got him half retained at only 3.25, maybe it's okay. $4 million, I definitely don't like that much. On top of the fact that you're giving up assets, it's not massive. It's from probably 40, instead of you're picking up 48th overall, you'll be picking at, do some quick math, 105th. I don't know why I took so long with that. But, yeah, similarly to Seattle with the Kakko trade, if you're St. Louis, I guess you got to do something because you're still in this weird spot where, like, you're young, but you want to win right now. Or maybe Seattle's not that young. But St. Louis, they were looking like they were going in more so of a retool, rebuild direction. Then they do something like this. It's Doug Armstrong makes one good move, great moves with Broberg and Holloway offer sheets, then does something really confusing like this. I'm not really sure what the objective right now is in St. Louis. And like I said a week or two ago, I think they're just going to be perfectly average the next 5 years. We don't have to rehash that, though.
I don't get it from St. Louis. I don't understand it. I'm happy to see Zellweger without Fowler there.
Yeah.
I think he could break out potentially for Anaheim. St. Louis, I don't understand what they're doing. I mean, fact, this is not a playoff team right now. It's just not. Fact, their forward core is pretty young and pretty okay. Their defense core is weirdly old and expensive compared to that forward core, right? I mean, Falk's not getting any younger. Parayko, I guess, did happen to get younger in the last year or so because he's playing better now. But, you know, that's a veteran who's on a pretty expensive contract. Torrey Krug might be, you know, LTIR retired for all we know. But if he comes back,
honestly, they probably want that at that point.
Yeah, right. Like
spend the 6.5
maybe it'd be for the best because if he comes back, you
Yeah.
have another defenseman who's in his mid-30s who's getting paid a ton. You know, you have 4 defensemen in your 30s on contracts that are inconvenient to trade. Let's say, what's the plan there? I don't get it. I don't see it. Like even if Cam Fowler magically becomes a good player again, I don't really know how that helps St. Louis. You know, you improve your second pair
Philip
D.
Broberg, or Broberg gets less minutes as a result.
Like, does anyone really think St. Louis is like one good second pair D away from being a playoff team? Like, even if we pretend Fowler can be that guy, which I agree with you, I don't think he can be that anymore. Even if he is, though, I don't think St. Louis is going to benefit at all.
Yeah, it's really weird, especially with guys like Theo Lidstein, like Adam Jiricek. They're going to need minutes maybe next season. No, Jiricek's probably 2 years away. But still, it's just weird because, as you mentioned, they have these guys locked up for a while. I just don't get what maybe Montgomery was like, if I'm coming to St. Louis, like, we're trying to win. I'm not trying to rebuild. But I just think that was a mistake. The St. Louis Blues, definitely more elite young talent. I liked Albert Dvorsky. I'm just rehashing what I said 2 to 3 weeks ago. So I don't really have much on the Cam Fowler trade besides that. I don't want to just rehash the past. He's not a good player anymore. At first, I thought they were taking him on for $6.5 million, and I was completely going to lose it. I can somewhat understand him being around the $4 million player, but that's like best case scenario. That's like if this goes perfectly well, he's a 25 to 30 point, bad but not horrible defensively guy that gives you 20 minutes a night. best case. Worst case, he only continues to get worse. He's a legit $1.5 to $2 million defenseman, and he drags Parayko down with him, and Parayko starts to regress as a result. And St. Louis misses the playoffs each of the 2 years that Cam Fowler's on the team.
I think that missing the playoffs is going to happen regardless of how well Cam Fowler plays.
Yeah, I could maybe see a universe where one of the teams that are in a playoff spot right now, horrible injuries, horrible goaltending, or something like that. But as we said, like, they're not beating in the first round. They're not beating the Vancouver Canucks, Edmonton Oilers, Minnesota Wild, Dallas Stars, whoever wins their division. Like, their ceiling, kind of like my New York Islanders, but I think the Islanders would be a little bit more dangerous. Their ceiling is like a 6-game exit in the first round this season, and probably next season, and probably the season after that at this point. But we're gonna move. We're gonna go positive. We're gonna go positive because my freaking Ottawa Senators are all the way back. If you don't know, I've been saying that the rebuild has been over for years at this point, and it's finally looking like it might be over. It finally might be over. When looking at Ottawa, they were 8-11-1 to start the season. But I kept on saying, like, Ullmark is just playing god-awful to start. Like, it is actually not the team. It's the goaltending yet again. I thought maybe they were just, like, cursed and, like, the Ottawa Senators would never have a good goaltender. But since then, he has gone 7-0-1 with a .956. He is absolutely killing it. Arguably should be in, like, Vezina talks relatively soon. They're a good team. They're objectively a good team. Last year, they were even a pretty decent team. It just, again, they got apocalyptic. Some of the worst goaltending that we have seen in recent memory. They were 12th last year in expected goals against per 60 at 5-on-5. They're 8th this season, so they have improved. But when looking at the jumps that they have made relative to goals against per game, they've gone from 28th last season to 9th this season. So their underlying numbers are just, their underlying defensive numbers are just matching up with the goaltending is matching that level of play compared to the goaltending being by far the worst in the NHL. And as a result, this team is pretty stout defensively, and especially with a guy like Drake Batherson having an amazing season, 33 points in 31 games right now. Josh Norris, maybe not worth $8 million, but a $6 to $6.5 million, 55-ish two-way second-line center. So they're not as reliant on Tim Stützle and Brady Tkachuk to carry the offense as well as Claude Giroux. This is just a good team. Like, it is just a good team. They gotta avoid injuries. They've been banged up a little bit, but if they can stay healthy, I see no reason going back to the New York Rangers, especially in the next month. The New York Islanders, they should lock down the second wild card spot. Not easily, but they're no shit the favorite right now, and I would put them at like 65% likely to make the playoffs.
I think they might make the playoffs. I am not at all convinced that this is rebuild over.
Obviously, I'm not saying they're gonna win the freaking Stanley Cup this season.
I mean, the way I see it, this is an average core that's being propped up by right now, a Vezina winning goalie who for the last month has played at a Vezina winning level. I mean,
but he was playing for the first 2/3 of the season, he was playing at a Jonas Korpisalo last year level. Like still on the season, he's been good, but he was part of the reason they started 8-11-1. He was working against them.
And now he's the biggest thing working for them. His save percentage in the month of December is a .962.
Yeah, I know. He's been great.
It's
not like they've clawed, like, it's not like they, like the Detroit Red Wings clawed their way to like around the record that they had at a late 8-11-1. They were playing good hockey. It's just they couldn't. Forsberg's still been bad this season yet again. It was insane. What was it, 2023? He was very good and then just fell off a cliff. But yeah, like they clawed their way to 8-11-1 in a weird sense because the goaltending was so bad, and now the goaltending is playing good. I'm not saying he's going to continue to have a .956 for the rest of the season, but if he just gives them .912 the rest of the way, they should make the playoffs.
I look at this team and I see like a perfectly average group that's going to go far or not purely because of their goalie. I think that nothing about what Ottawa's done this season shows anything about like the rebuild, the young forwards, the core, Tkachuk, Batherson, Norris, those guys.
I'd say Batherson looking like his, 2022 before he got hurt form. I'd say that's pretty big. Not saying he's going to be a consistent point per game guy, but him going from prior seasons being around 60 points to now being a 75-ish point guy driving his own line, I'd say it's pretty big for the rebuild.
I mean, I give Ottawa credit that their main weakness was their goalie. They went out and got the best goalie possible, and right now that looks like it's working for them. But really, all that says to me is that they got a good goalie in. I mean, Olmark at his ceiling, and he's not always at his ceiling. He's not always consistent. At his ceiling, Olmark is the kind of goalie who can single-handedly carry a mediocre team into the playoffs. He's at his best when he was winning the Vezina in Boston. He was on that Sorokin, Shesterkin level. He's at that level right now. If he continues to be like close to that level, I think Ottawa could be scary. If he's going to be a sub 9-10 goalie, nothing about the rest of the team really makes me think that they're there yet. They're too shallow still. They need a better bottom six. The D core collectively is fine, I think. It's really like, where does that mid-level scoring come from, right? Because like a team like Toronto, very dangerous scoring, like 3-ish lines deep. Carolina for sure, the Devils for sure are that deep offensively. Ottawa's like a line and a half right now, depending on how much you like Norris.
I'd agree with that. They definitely, Shane Pinto, Long Island kid, has been a little bit underwhelming this season, as well as Ridley Gregg. But I still think that those guys can be effective middle sixers for the team. In terms of the defense core, they definitely need someone to replace Travis Hamonic. He's been horrible. He's been dragging down a guy like Jake Sanderson. But I think Shabbat has been very impressive. And when Artem Zub is healthy, he is one of the more lockdown physical defensemen in the entire NHL. Again, I don't think that they're like a serious threat in the Eastern Conference. I'm just talking about making the playoffs. I would easily pick them to lose to Washington, New Jersey, Florida, Toronto in the first round of the playoffs, most likely. But I think that this is very encouraging, especially when we see the other teams that they were lumped in with in Detroit, Buffalo, absolutely shit the bed yet again. For the Senators to finally look like they're taking their step, that next step after facing so much adversity to start this season, that's also what really impressed me with this team. They could have quit like the last 2 to 3 years after starting 8-11-1, but they really locked in as a result. And I'd be pretty bullish if I was an Ottawa Senators fan. The only problem is outside of Carter Yakimchuk, where do they go to that next level might be a little bit tough because they don't really have any prospects left in the system besides Yakimchuk, and I'm not even that high on Yakimchuk. That concerns me a little bit, but right now, if you're a Senators fan, you're fucking through the roof.
Yeah, I guess the way I see it, we're still one piece away, but it's not a huge piece. It's like you're 1 second liner away from me saying, okay, this is a playoff team.
Yeah.
And second liners you can get at the trade deadline.
Yeah, David Perron, I think he's been hurt a lot, but hopefully he can bounce back and be that. Probably isn't that. Probably more so of a third liner at this point. But yeah, I think this offseason they should be ultra aggressive yet again and potentially look for another. They got to re-sign Claude Giroux. That might be tough. Hopefully he can take a team-friendly deal, but also go out and acquire yet another top 6 forward. That should have been Tyler. They should have used that Tyler Boucher pick back in 2021 better, and that could have been the guy that would have been joining the NHL roster right now. Instead, they picked him for some goddamn reason. But yeah, I think when you see every other team in the Eastern Conference for the most part just shitting the bed, and Ottawa of all teams is the team that is balling out right now, I think it's going to continue, and I think they're finally putting it together because that missing piece was so obvious. Last year with league average goaltending, not saying they make the playoffs, but they're definitely in the mix final couple of days with the Islanders and the Capitals last season.
Yeah, I agree with that. The goalie was the main issue. They fixed the goalie. I'll give them credit for that much. Good for them.
All right, moving on. Speaking of bust, I was shitting on Tyler Boucher. I gotta look at my Islanders because they finally waived Oliver Wahlstrom, and he is heading to the Boston Bruins. He's from Maine and played at Boston University or Boston College, so he's like a little bit of a homecoming. If he turns it around, great. It was never going to happen on Long Island. He just wasn't good ever really for the New York Islanders. And when looking at him, he was a goal-scoring machine with the U.S. National Team Development Program, and I've already seen people comparing him to Cole Eiserman. But even after his first year in college, the writing was kind of on the wall. He had like 8 goals, 7 assists, 15 points, and like 30. Like he was, after he got drafted 10th or 11th overall, he immediately fell off in terms of the goal scoring. He never found that again. Cole Eiserman is goal scoring at a high rate right now. He has like 9 goals in 16 games. So yeah, Wahlstrom never regained that goal scoring, and he never was the highest motor, best defensive player. So he never was going to fit in a bottom 6 role on my New York Islanders. So yeah, if Boston finds something with him, God bless him. I'm rooting for him. I still like the guy, but he just definitely was not cut out for a Patrick Waugh and Lou Lamoriello managed team.
Now, I mean, you said it. I'd be lying if I said I had a ton of thoughts on
No,
Wahlstrom.
yeah,
I
I just
mean,
want to
he's a
talk.
bust. He is
If
what
I
he
wasn't an
is.
Islanders fan, I wouldn't be talking about this.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be fair and say, like Pavel Zacha was a higher draft pick than him. Major bust in New Jersey, goes to Boston,
He was
turns
still
it
like
around
he was still like
enough.
40-ish points in New Jersey. Like this guy couldn't even
Yeah,
beat out Simon Holmstrom and like Kyle McLean at times, even though I like those guys
I'm just
for
saying
minutes.
that, Boston has some experience with
It's possible.
reclamation
Yeah.
projects. I mean, Zacha turned into like a good role player as opposed to a draft bust. And it's the same kind of stuff we're talking with Kakko, right? Sometimes you're a draft bust on one team. Literally
Yeah.
all you need is for a different team who sees you in a different role. And now you're not a draft bust. You're just like a decent role player. And that's all you have to be. And that's good enough.
Aye, that's all we'll talk about Wahlstrom. I'm sure most of the listeners at home don't give a fucking rat's ass. Next up, there's some U.S. Canadian talk relative to the Canadian dollar falling off. Stark. We're talking about geopolitics now. The U.S. The Canadian dollar conversion rate fell below zero point 0.7 for the first time since 2002, and we're just going to talk about this because I think this does have an effect on the NHL in terms of Quebec City is never getting a fucking team. Like
Never.
you can, you can wish that goodbye. Like Gary Bettman is not going to put a team in Quebec City, considering the economics behind Quebec City. And we've talked about this for years. We never thought a team was coming because there's just not the population base. The overall metro area is only like 900,000. And I just gotta say this, like the metro pop, you got to look at the overall metro population. I've seen people send me about Quebec City that the actual city is like 750,000, and then they send me like Anaheim is only like 300,000. No shit. It's about the overall metro. The actual population of Boston, I think, is like 500,000. The overall metro population is like 3.5 million. So when looking at a city like Quebec City, I just can't see it happening. They don't have the corporate money to get a team down the line. And now that there's serious economic uncertainty between Canada and the United States relative to the dollar, it's not going to happen. And you want to tackle the Winnipeg part of this or maybe some other
I
markets?
do. Yeah, I'd actually love. I
Jets fans,
prepared
go
some
ahead.
notes
Yeah.
here on this. So first of all, people will say, well, Winnipeg got a team and that's a small market. Correct. When the Winnipeg Jets played their first game back, October 2011, the Canadian dollar was 99 cents to the US dollar. Exchange rate was basically flat at that time. There was no larger economic issue. Since then, broadly, the Canadian dollar has got weaker. Canadians, in real inflationary terms, have got poorer compared to Americans. It just doesn't make money sense. I mean, the Winnipeg Jets were bad for like a year and a half or so, and the ownership was like sending threats about moving the
We gotta
team.
sell these season
Like,
tickets.
It's the Canadian market's just not great for hockey, and it's a built-in problem because of course the Canadian market is where hockey was most popular. If Gary Bettman had his way, he would have like a 48 team league with 47 teams in the US and one in Toronto. The problem is
Montreal.
you're probably right there. The problem is like there aren't 47 US cities that would sell out a hockey game. It's just not true. But like economic wise, it's all in the US right now. Seattle doesn't need to sell out every game to make more money for the league than a Quebec that would sell out every game. Seattle, the money that their fans pay is worth more. Their fans at the
Starbucks
high end are
at the
richer,
HQ
right? You're
is
selling
buying,
more
boxes.
$300, $400 a share luxury boxes in Seattle compared to Quebec or Winnipeg or wherever in Canada.
Yeah, the money isn't primarily made off the fan that's buying a $20 upper bowl ticket.
No, it's you want those corporate sponsors in, and that's been Winnipeg's issue as a franchise this whole time. Is you'd struggle a lot to get corporate sponsors. It would be the same in Quebec in a way that wouldn't be true in Houston. Houston won't sell out every game.
The
Quebec
oil
probably
money-
would,
the oil
but
money would be
Houston will
nuts.
get enough sponsors that selling out the upper bowl won't even matter.
Yeah. I think Winnipeg would. We talked about it yesterday, but like Winnipeg, it's going to come down to if the post Hellebuck era, if they fuck up that rebuild in its 8 straight years of not being in the playoffs, I think it could get really ugly. They're not going to, like, after year 2 of a rebuild, just pick up and leave. But it definitely is. It's a little bit concerning if I was a Canadian fan of a smaller market. I think, obviously, Toronto's safe. Montreal, Ottawa, I would say, is good. Vancouver, Calgary, it's looking like they're getting a new arena soon, so hopefully they'll be good. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of uncertainty between Canada and the United States, and the incoming administration for America might not make that any better. But yeah, you definitely got to look if you're a Winnipeg Jets fan, and just be monitoring that relative conversion rate because it is pretty uncertain right now. I don't want that to happen. I think they're definitely going to go to Atlanta and Houston expansion wise. They're not prepping a potential Winnipeg relocation, but it would shock me in a decade from now if it stays at 0.7%, 0.7 conversion or goes even lower from now. If they say, screw it, we can move Winnipeg to Milwaukee, the Winnipeg fans, the Manitoba fans will stay fans. They can drive the 8 hours to games, and we pick up a new market or Kansas City or something like that. It would not shock me one bit because, again, the money might be there from an American perspective, not to be biased. Now we're going to finish it up with follower takes, agree or disagree. If you've been watching for a while, you know how this goes. We post a poll on our Instagram in the box pod, and basically you send in takes. These aren't hot takes. This is just going to be like 50-50 takes, and me and Babiak are going to say on a count of 3 whether we agree or disagree. If we disagree on agreeing, I don't know what the fuck I'm saying right now, but then we'll debate it out. If not, we'll just go over our reasons. We like to get you guys involved. So up first from John Gross, the Sabres will finish last in the Eastern Conference. 3, 2, 1. Disagree.
Agree. Oh, no.
You think wearing their jersey, you think they're going to be that bad?
I do. The problem I see as far as finishing dead last in the East is that Columbus and Montreal are both at least going to be like highly motivated to the end.
Yeah.
I mean, Montreal has a lot of like young players trying to prove themselves, earn more ice time for next year. Fringe guys who were not high draft picks, were not guaranteed spots. Patrick Laine is extremely motivated to be showing out every single day. Montembeault is going to be working hard. He's Team Canada now. There's expectations with that. Montreal's a media market that's not going to accept guys not trying. They can lose, but they can't not try. Columbus, very different circumstances, but kind of similar in that, because of the Gaudreau stuff, you have a team that's, even though they're in tank mode right now, the individual guys on the ice are super motivated to try really hard every night and win games, right? The players on the ice are not trying to get a first overall pick next year. They're trying to honor Johnny Hockey and win some hockey games. Buffalo, I'm not sure I see those incentives, right? Most of that core group is already on their like big contracts. There's not a ton that they need to be playing for in the near term, right? If Dylan Cousins doesn't improve at all and doesn't try the rest of the year, will it matter to him? Will it matter to Bowen Byram? Will it matter to anyone if Rasmus Dahlin slows down in the last couple months? I don't see Buffalo as a team that's going to be like full of motivated guys really trying. It to me seems like the kind of stale locker room where people are going to be coasting.
That's fair. I think I said last episode I have Detroit finishing last. I think Columbus will eventually come down a little bit, even though their underlying numbers are pretty solid. I think the Sabres will figure it out and be able to play at least like not 500, but like 75 point pace season the rest of the way. I think that they do still have a lot of talent, even though that talent hasn't really materialized and guys haven't really lived up to expectations. I think we're watching definitely the bottoming out right now from Buffalo. No shit, 11 straight losses. But I think that they're still competent enough, and they don't have like glaring weaknesses that can get exploited, where I think that they can be decent the rest of the way. We're going to move on to the next one. We got Tave Pet. The Avs are a top 6 contender in the league this season.
The Avs are not a top 6 contender, is his take.
Okay, I might have mistyped that, but are not a top 6 contender in this league. 3, 2, 1, agree.
Not a top 6 contender. I'm not sure if that's agree or disagree. They're not a top contender.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I still can't go there. Just I'm not going to trust Mackenzie Blackwood to be like an absolute stud like we talked about last week. The depth still scares me a little bit, especially with the defense score. They're up there. They definitely could go on a run. They're top 10 for sure, but I think I still like the Oilers, Canucks, Stars more than them in the Western Conference, and then in the East, a couple other teams.
The Colorado Avalanche are 10th in the West in points percentage right now. Top 6? That's absurd. That's absurd. This team does not have a goalie. this
You hated
team
Mackenzie Blatt.
does
You don't
not
like
have
that
a
trade.
bottom six. I don't see any way that you can call the Avs a top contender. I think their floor is a playoff team because they have the top
Yeah, I
end
think they're gonna
talent.
make it, yeah.
You know, I
But
mean,
they haven't put it together.
this team reminds me right now of the team. Right now, they remind me of, but they're playing worse than the team that was good but kind of coasting in the regular season and then gets pumped by Seattle round one a couple years ago.
That's fair. That's fair.
That to me is what this team is, except the goalie situation is even worse now.
Yeah, Georgiev was good in 2023.
Yeah, Georgiev, he was, poor this year, but he has been good. He's put together entire seasons of being pretty decent. I don't trust Blackwood to be as good as Georgiev 2-3 years ago. And I just don't see the overall talent, right? I mean, Sam Girard is, iffy there, back and forth, up and down. Like Devon Tays this year has been very up and down, well below his usual ranges from the last couple years.
He got his contract. He's complacent now. He got a 7x7. But I think top six is just a little bit too far, but we're going to move on. We got an interesting one from Brooksy92. Hellebuck is a Hall of Famer if he retired tomorrow. 3, 2, 1. Disagree. I think if you said at the end of the season, considering he's the favorite to win the Vezina trophy right now, even though he maybe doesn't have the longevity, if he has 3 Vezinas, that would put him in. But I look at a guy like Tim Thomas that has 2 Vezinas, didn't play as long as Hellebuck, but had a similar prime of arguably being the best goalie in the NHL for like a 5 to 6 year stretch, and has the playoff success that maybe makes up for the lack of longevity compared to a Hellebuck. So yeah, I think right now, if he retired, he's just below 300 wins. He does have 2 Vezinas. I don't like again, it's hard to say like, oh, he doesn't have the playoff resume. It's obviously not solely on him. But if we're talking about the Hall of Fame, I think he'd just barely be on the outside looking in. I think even if he doesn't go on a deep playoff run, even if he doesn't win the Vezina this season or next, if he just finishes this season out and has one more season at 9-18 play, I'd probably put him in because he'd be at like 350 wins at that point and just have such an insane 8-year run. But right now, today, if his career ended, I think he'd slightly be on the outside looking in.
First of all, shout out Brooksy, because this was my favorite question we've done in a while. This really made me think. I went back and forth here. I would say that you read my mind pretty much perfectly, that, if he gets a 3rd Vezina, then sure, I agree the series a lock.
It'd be like 320 wins. Like it'd be
it would be like a good, like short but elite peak to bring him in there just on the inside. But, if he retires tomorrow, he's played 8 full seasons. 7 of those would count as peak seasons. I agree with you that, like, Tim Thomas is probably the most comparable guy. Hellebuck has a slightly better overall resume, I would say, because he's played longer. He's had more top-level seasons. But, like, a slightly better Tim Thomas, I don't know if that gets in, because I don't think Tim Thomas is getting in anytime soon.
He's never getting in. I think also, funny enough, another Boston goalie, but like
Tuukka
Rask.
Rask. Yes.
Tuukka Rask, in my opinion, isn't a Hall of Famer. He just barely misses out. And Tuukka Rask did have a great 8-year run like a Connor Hellebuck. So again, Connor Hellebuck, going to be all, I feel like someone might be like, you're saying Connor Hellebuck's not a Hall of Famer. He's no shit unless he blows out his knees, God forbid, or something happens. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. We're saying, like, by the end of the season, he'll arguably be a Hall of Famer. But if the season ended today, we're going with no. Next up, Fever and Nets says Lane Hudson will be 85 to 90% of Quinn Hughes. 3, 2, 1.
Disagree.
Agree. It's tough. Are we saying so 80? Not screw it. I disagree, actually. I don't think he's going to be as good defensively. But, I think offensively, he could be a 75-ish point guy, one of the best playmaking defenseman and just dominant at the blue line. I just think, again, what we've seen with Quinn Hughes the last 2 to 3 years in terms of his defensive prowess really emerging, I'm not sure Lane Hudson will ever be that. I'm not saying Lane Hudson is going to be as bad defensively right now as he's been. He's a rookie defenseman. He's going to get better. But yeah, we saw Quinn Hughes just flip a switch the last 2 to 3 years to go from not only probably the best passing defenseman in the entire NHL to now also being pretty stout both ways, and also Quinn Hughes is small, but he's only like 5'11". Not saying height is the end of the world, but like he's small-ish. Lane Hudson is decently smaller. That does somewhat matter in the long run. So I think very good. I think it can be like 75, 80% of Quinn Hughes, but 85 to 90%, that's you saying he's going to be a top 10, top 8 defenseman probably in the NHL.
Yeah, I mean, you're reading my minds here. That's so much of what I was about to say.
Mind.
Yeah, if we're saying like on a purely math it out, like have several seasons that are 85% of the points of several Quinn Hughes seasons, I think it's possible. If you're taking like a big picture view, I don't know if people understand just how good 85% of Quinn Hughes is. Like Quinn Hughes right now is on a Hall of Fame trajectory, probably a better than Adam Fox career trajectory for like a current contemporary.
Yeah, I mean,
looking
more
historically,
team success at this point.
yeah, looking historically, he's on like minus the playoffs, a Duncan Keith or better trajectory, a Shea Weber or better trajectory. Like 85% of Quinn Hughes would be a several-time All-Star who's like a number 1 D for a decade.
Yeah, 90% of it is probably still a Hall of Famer.
Probably, yeah. I think it's the way he's been playing lately, I think it's possible Quinn Hughes ends up as like an inner circle Hall of Famer. Like,
yeah, like
especially
he won't win 3 Norrises maybe, but
he might. He
yeah,
might
like
even get
Erik
number 2
Karlsson.
this year.
He
right?
might, yeah, fuck. He might end up like in the same ilk as an Erik Karlsson or Victor Hedman.
Especially, if Cale Makar's health wavers here and there, which historically Cale Makar has not been the healthiest player in the world, I think Quinn Hughes can end up being seen as like the defenseman of the 2020s.
It's possible,
and
yeah.
90% of that, you're right, would still be like at least in the discussion for the Hall of Fame caliber player.
Yeah, I think Lane Hudson can definitely be a top 15 defenseman in his prime, be a legit number 1. I've always been decently high on him. But yeah, again, we're talking about a guy that could end up being a top 15, top 10 defenseman of all time.
Yeah, like this question's making me think like, I don't know, throw a name here. Is Dustin Byfuglien 85% of Quinn Hughes?
No.
Like that's a reasonably high bar, right? If Lane Hudson is as good of a player just generally as Dustin Byfuglien, they're very different players, of course.
Yeah, you
extremely different. I was just
polar
thinking of like the first retired guy
Yeah.
who's a good but not a Hall of Famer that popped into my head.
Who was like in Norris talks for a while?
Like
I mean,
a Brian
PK Subban,
Campbell type
like
player?
PK Subban probably. I mean,
Yeah,
that's probably he got it.
Subban won one, so I
Yeah.
guess Subban's probably like. But you're right. I think Subban's like the worst possible player who would be a yes here. And if you get PK Subban, you're thrilled with that.
Yeah,
That's
he
a
had
great player.
Won the Norris and had like 2 or 3 seasons where he was top 4, I think. So yeah, he was a consensus top 5 guy for a while. To say that's going to be Lane Hudson, I cannot quite go there. But that's the end of the episode. Another banger in the book. So let us know in the comments, what do you think about this? Make sure to follow the Instagram, follow all the pages so you can get involved with this as well. Anything else you want to say?
Keep these questions coming. A few of them were good.
Yeah.
Some of them were good.
Happy holidays to all of you and your family from us at In the Box. And we'll be seeing the next one. Peace.